Today I'm going over 15 books that have helped me and I think might help you too. The first book I'm going over today is The Language of Letting Go, Daily Meditations for Codependence by Melody Beattie. So this book was published in 1990, but what's in it is very relevant today. Here's a synopsis. Written for those of us who struggle with codependency, these daily meditations offer growth and renewal and remind us that the best thing we can do is take responsibility for our own self-care. Melody integrates her own life experiences and fundamental recovery reflections in this unique daily meditation book, written especially for those of us who struggle with the issue of codependency. Problems are made to be solved. Melody reminds us, and the best thing we can do is take responsibility for our own pain and self-care. In this daily inspirational book, Melody provides us with a thought to guide us through the day, and she encourages us to remember that each day is an opportunity for growth and renewal. So what I particularly like about this book, by the way, this is the first book that I've read within this whole list. I'm putting it in the order that I read it. But what I liked about this book when I first got it is, like I just mentioned, it's a daily, almost like a devotional, but not really. Just a quick blurb every day. So it wasn't like this huge time commitment, even though I just recently read through it again, straight through. But it had some good points in it for somebody like me who always feels like I have to kind of put my feelings in the back seat when nobody's asking me to do it. And I feel like there's a few people in my life at the time where I was reading it that I thought I had to put before myself. So this is a good reminder. When I was going through it, I woke up every morning and kind of went through it. It was a good reminder that you got to look out for yourself. You can't keep pouring into other people. Not saying you can't keep pouring into them, but you got to remember, nobody's asking you to do all that. A lot of what you're going through is kind of self-inflicted. So that was a good book for that reason. The second one is Frontation, Breaking Free from Childhood Trauma. This is by Arlene Drake, and it was written or published in, 2017. With more than 30 years of experience, Dr. Drake writes a guide for those desperately in need of a way to break free from the pain of childhood abuse and reclaim their lives. When confronted with an abused child, our first impulse is to drop everything and provide comfort, get him or her out of danger, and find out what the hell is going on at home. It's obvious that the child is helpless, in trouble, and needs protection. Parents are not. We instinctively know what to do. We take care of the child. But what if the child is you? Active and directive, Frontation is filled with exercises and the simple, effective tools Dr. Drake has used successfully with her own clients for more than 3 decades. It lays out a powerful way to repair the damage of childhood abuse and its lasting effects by teaching what your parents could have and couldn't, an invaluable set of skills and practices that would give you the resources to live a healthy adult life. With the clear path this book provides, you can finally acknowledge that the suffering and the pain can stop. The destructive patterns can end. You can graduate at least into a life beyond abuse victim, and for the first time take the power back to your abusers and finally be at peace. So the first thing I can say about this book is it had actionable steps in it. It's a book, but it had activities, so it guided you through what the activity was, and you could kind of see the relevance of the activity when you're going through it. But I like that at the end of it, if you do it in one notebook, you pretty much have a really beefy journal. So I liked it. I threw it away after I was done with it because I was over it. But I thought it felt good to put everything that you felt surrounding this topic into one notebook and then get rid of it. Going into it, somebody actually suggested this on Instagram. And I was like, oh yeah, it sounds cool, but abuse is so I don't really want to read about abuse, but I read it anyway because somebody that I trusted kind of recommended it because she read the book. So I read it and realize what my definition of abuse was at the time was so narrow and so laser focused that so many other things like you make excuses for, but it actually is abuse. So this is a good book, very eye-opening, and it has quick activities, not too much, that I suggest you put in one notebook so you can kind of have a culmination at the end and you can do what you want with it. You can keep it, you can let somebody else read it, or you can throw it away like I did. The next one is The Body Keeps Score: Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. This was published in 2014. This one is the first one on the list that's a New York Times bestseller. Essential reading for anyone interested in understanding and treating traumatic stress and the cope of its impact on society. Trauma is a fact of life. Veterans and their families deal with the painful aftermath of combat. 1 in 5 Americans have been molested. 1 in 4 grew up with alcoholics. 1 in 3 couples have engaged in physical violence. Dr. Bandy Kolk, one of the world's foremost experts on trauma, has spent over 3 decades working with survivors. In this book, he uses recent scientific advances to show how trauma literally reshapes both body and brain, compromising sufferers' capabilities for pleasure, engagement, self-control, and trust. He explores innovative treatments for neurofeedback and meditation to sports, drama, and yoga that offer new paths to recovery by activating the brain's natural neuroplasticity. Based on his own research and that of other leading specialists, this book exposes the tremendous power of our relationship both to hurt and to heal, and offers new hope for reclaiming lives. I put this book on here, but it's probably my least favorite of every book that I'm mentioning today, but still helpful, which is why I made the list. It had some new age things in it that I didn't necessarily agree with or find helpful, but a lot of it talked about the science of trauma, which I think when you're feeling something and it's really emotional and mental in a lot of ways, it's hard to look at that from an objective point of view, and you feel like you can't really make sense of why you do what you do and why you feel the way you feel and how those relationships actually affect you. So this was kind of interesting and opened my eyes to see what's the science behind that. Like what are other people experiencing, and what does research say about it? Again, what they actually prescribed in it wasn't really helpful to me, at least, but I found it interesting to hear about like the more concrete ideas surrounding trauma and things like that. So that's why this book is on the list. Probably my least favorite, but very helpful because I was able to see like, oh, it's not just all about how I feel. There's other things that go into that too. And so where are we? Number 4. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents: How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents by Lindsay Gibson. So this book was published in 2015. If you grew up with an emotionally immature, unavailable, or selfish parent, you may have lingering feelings of anger, loneliness, betrayal, and abandonment. You may recall your childhood as a time when your emotional needs were not met, when your feelings were dismissed, or when you took on adult levels of responsibility in the effort to compensate for your parents' behavior. These wounds can be healed and you can move forward in your life. In this breakthrough book, clinical psychologist Lindsay Gibson exposes the destructive nature of parents who are emotionally immature or unavailable. You will see how these parents create a sense of neglect and discover ways to heal from the pain and confusion caused by your childhood. By freeing yourself from your parents' emotional immaturity, you can recover your true nature, control how you react to them, and avoid disappointment. Finally, you'll learn how to create positive new relationships so you can build a better life. And then it also says, discover the 4 types of difficult parents. 1, the emotional parent who instills feelings of instability and anxiety. 2, the driven parent who stays busy trying to be perfect, trying to perfect everything and everyone. 3, the passive parent who avoids dealing with anything upsetting. And 4, the rejecting parent who is withdrawn, dismissive, and derogatory. This book took me the longest to get through. I think it bothered me at first when I first read it, but then I had to go back and kind of break down each part. I couldn't read it straight through like I did the other books, just because it was so many different emotions that was coming up while I was actually reading this book. But I'm glad I read it. It was hard to get through, and I feel like I reopened the wound that I thought was closed. But I'm glad I read it because it helped me disassociate almost with like taking on other people's behavior and like not put that on myself. So that was helpful. And it also helped me to see my parents separate from me. Like I always knew that their behavior was on them, but it really helped me separate that and not look at that as a reflection of what I did or what I said or anything like that. So this book, it was good. Okay, so the 5th book is Black Women, Black Love, America's War on African American Marriage by Diane Stewart. This was published in 2020. In this analysis of social history, examine the complex lineage of America's oppression on Black companionship. According to the 2010 census, more than 70% of Black women in America are unmarried. Black Women, Black Love reveals how 4 centuries of laws, policies, and customs have created that crisis. Diane Stewart begins in the colonial era when slave owners denied Blacks the right to marry, divided families, and, in many cases, raped enslaved women and girls. Later, during Reconstruction and the ensuing decades, violence split up couples again as millions embarked on the Great Migration North, where the welfare system mandated that women remain single in order to receive government support. And no institution has forbidden Black love as effectively as a prison industrial complex, which removes Black men en masse from the pool of marriageable partners. This book is researched and deeply felt and reveals how Blacks have been systematically broken up and proposes strategies for dismantling the structural forces that have plagued Black love and marriage for centuries. This book is on the list for a different reason than the other books that I mentioned. I'm a Black woman. I'm married to a Black man. And this book highlights and makes me really reflective of just how much we beat the odds. It's a reminder to be grateful for where we are and how far we've come, but also to be real that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And even like, just be mindful of how I show up in my marriage. So that's what I liked about this book in particular. Okay, book number 6, How to Be an Adult in Relationships, The 5 Keys to Mindful Loving by David Rico. This was published in 2018. Most people think of love as a feeling, but the love is not so much a feeling as a way of being present. In this book, Rico offers a fresh perspective on love and relationships, one that focuses on not finding an ideal mate, but on becoming more of a loving and realistic person. Drawing on some concepts of mindfulness, How to Be an Adult in Relationship explores 5 hallmarks of mindful loving and how they play a key role in relationships throughout life. 1, attention to the present moment, observing, listening, and noticing all the feelings at play in our relationships. 2, acceptance of ourselves and others just as we are. 3, appreciation of all our gifts, our limits, our longings, and our human predicament. 4, affection shown through holding and touching in respectful ways. And 5, allowing life and love to be just as they are, without all the ecstasy, and ache, and without trying to take control. Like I said in the synopsis, it's really a book about mindfulness, just being present, taking inventory of how things are, and not trying to change the things that you just can't change. So this kind of goes back to the book that I just mentioned before about Black women and Black love. It's more of a reflective book. And I feel like as somebody that's constantly overthinking, it's nice to have a book that's forcing me to slow down and really just take things how they are. Like, don't try to change anything that you can't change and focus on the things that you can. And just see, like, take an inventory of how you show up, not just in my marriage, but in my friendships, with my kids, at work, and things like that. So that's why I like this book. Moving on. This book is called Rewire. Change your brain to break bad habits, overcome addictions, conquer self-destructive behaviors. This is by Richard O'Connor, and it was published in 2014. The best-selling author offers a brain-based guide to help us finally get rid of the bad habits that plague us. We humans tend to get in our own way from time to time, whether it comes to not speaking up for ourselves, going back to bad romantic partners, our umpteenth diet, or engaging in any range of bad habits we just can't seem to shake. In this book, the psychotherapist reveals why our bad habits die so hard. We have 2 brains. One, a thoughtful, conscious, deliberate self, and the other, an automatic self that does most of the work without our attention. Using new research and knowledge about how the brain works, this book clears a path to lasting, effective change for behaviors that include procrastination, overeating, chronic disorganization, staying in bad situations, excessive worrying, risk-taking, passive aggression, self-medication, and more. Bringing together many different fields in psychology and brain science, Rewire offers a refreshing, science-based new paradigm for readers. I like this book because it allowed me to get to more of the science behind what I feel. So a lot of times when we're going through things, it's very emotional, it's very mental, and you kind of feel like you're the only one dealing with it. But I mean, you're not, but you just feel like you can't really make sense of why things are how they are. So this book was refreshing because you were able to kind of get into some research-based principles and things about just downright how things affect your body, your mind, how decision-making is affected, and things like that. So I like this because I've been trying to build better habits. I've been trying to be more consistent in a lot of ways. And this book helped me understand kind of why I haven't in the past and basic, simple things that I can do to get better in the future. Okay, this book is called It's On Me. Accept Hard Truths, Discover Yourself, and Change Your Life by Sarah Kubrick. This was released in 2023. So many of us feel lonely, unfulfilled, or trapped in our roles and relationships, in cycles of self-sabotage and bad decisions, by our patterns and misguided attempts to feel happy or to feel something. According to this psychotherapist, it doesn't have to be that difficult, really. The answer is found in facing ourselves, whatever version that might be, regardless of whether we like the person we see reflected back or not. It's about accepting full responsibility for the choices and actions that we create. It's about finally taking ownership of the person we call self. It's about realizing that it's on us to figure out the 2 most essential questions: who am I and why am I here? And live accordingly. This book unpacks self-loss, giving us new vocabulary to understand this rarely talked about experience, and offers tools she's used for years to help her clients recover. Self-loss becomes apparent when we do not recognize ourselves in our actions, words, or relationships, when we lose sight of who we truly are and feel the pain and emptiness from performing or observing life rather than living it. Guiding us through her unique process, she proves that we can experience but not feel overpowered by our emotions, establish a healthy connection to our bodies, set loving boundaries to define ourselves and heal our relationships, declutter our physical and mental environments to create space to nurture ourselves, and find meaning and purpose in a seemingly meaningless world. I feel like most people can relate to the fact that they've been in a spot where they felt lost. They felt like they were stuck in some kind of way. They didn't recognize who they were. Maybe they stopped doing stuff that they used to love and they don't really know why. I've been kind of recently in a spot where I just felt like I'm doing a lot of things and none of them are leading anywhere. And I feel like it's just a waste of time. Like, what am I actually doing? Why am I doing it? And which one of those things actually matter? Life didn't necessarily turn out exactly how I pictured it. In some ways, it's much better. But I just felt like, what am I actually doing? So this book helped me because obviously, again, I'm not the only one that's going through it. I mean, I knew that, but it did have some like really practical steps and concrete ideas that helped me kind of understand that sometimes life is the thing that you're doing. Like, that's what it actually is. So that book was really helpful to me. The next book is called Brave Enough to Be Broken: How to Embrace Your Pain and Discover Hope and Healing. And this was published in 2023 by Toni Collier. Trauma, abuse, childhood wounds, and toxic relationships have broken us. But there is no shame in brokenness. In fact, it's in our brokenness where the healing power of Jesus comes to find us. This book is a biblical roadmap you can use to heal from the pain, the shame, and the regrets that have tried to steal your joy, so you can rest in the unconditional love and healing. The founder of whatever this is will show you how to bravely process your brokenness. Many of us feel the pressure to be perfect, but what we really want is the freedom to be broken. We long to hear that our brokenness doesn't discount us, and we want a way out of the pain that threatens to overwhelm us. You'll learn to overcome shame and other inner obstacles blocking you from healing. Recognize the harmful effects of trauma and toxic relationships on your mental health. Embrace your brokenness so you can help others do the same. Hear the voice saying you are worthy when you don't feel it, and accept the unconditional love of Jesus and surrender your brokenness. This was a feel-good book to me. The other ones were helpful, but they didn't necessarily make me feel good. This book actually made me feel good. Like, when I was reading it, I really thought about just how far like God has taken me, and how even though like there's been times where I've been just, I felt broken, and I probably was at the time, and just knowing that even though I didn't feel like enough, that I'm always enough, like in the eyes of God. So this book was helpful. It made me feel good. It was comforting and warm. And I actually like how the author wrote. So the next book is Forgiving What You Can't Forget. Discover how to move on, make peace with painful memories, and create a life that's beautiful again. This book was published in 2020. You deserve to stop suffering because of what other people have done to you. Have you ever felt stuck in a cycle of unresolved pain, playing offenses over and over in your mind? You know you can't go on like this, but you don't know what to do next. Lisa has wrestled through this journey, but in surprising ways, she discovered how to let go of bound up resentment and overcome the resistance to forgiving people who aren't willing to make things right. With the deep empathy, therapeutic insight, and Bible teaching coming out of more than 1,000 hours of theological study, Lisa will help you learn how to move on when the other person refuses to change and never says they're sorry. Walk through a step-by-step process to free yourself from the hurt of your past and feel less offended today. Discover what the Bible really says about forgiveness and the peace that comes from living it out right now. Identify what's stealing trust and vulnerability from your relationships so that you can believe that there is still good ahead. And disempower the triggers hijacking your emotions by embracing the two necessary parts of forgiveness. So something that I struggle with is forgiveness. It's something I've been working on for probably 2 decades, and I've read a lot of stuff surrounding forgiveness. This book, I'm not saying it's the cure to not being able to forgive or like that resistance to forgiving, but it's helpful because it's framed differently than I've seen in other books. So everybody always says, forgiveness is not about the other person, it's about you. Yeah, that's true. But she highlights, I feel like other books don't really like give validation to the fact that those people not sorry. They're not gonna be sorry. And that by itself, outside of the actual offense, that's offensive. Like to somebody that tries to own up to what they do, to somebody that tries to at least be mindful, like if I'm hurting somebody else, to know that you just like, it is what it is. Like, I'm not sorry. Like, I don't even know that a thing happened. That is annoying and triggering, and it makes me frustrated. So I think she was one of the few people that actually like gives a valid claim to understanding how that's its own separate issue. And that's why I appreciated this book, because that's half of the issue that I have with forgiveness. Like, come on now. But that's why I found that book helpful. Next is How to Hug a Porcupine: Easy Ways to Love the Difficult People in Your Life by Julie Briskman. And this was released in 2017. Most of us know someone who, for whatever reason, always seems to cause problems, irritate others, and incite conflict. Often these people are part of our daily lives. The truth is that these troublemakers haven't necessarily asked to be this way. Sometimes we need to learn new approaches to deal with people who are harder to get along with or love. This book explains that making peace with others isn't as tough or terrible as we think it is, especially when we have an adorable animal analogy to apply it to real life problems. This book provides tips for calming the quills of parenting, children, siblings, strangers, and other prickly people you may encounter. Among other tips, this book includes 3 easy ways to end an argument, how to spot the porcupine in others, and how to spot the porcupine in ourselves. This book was cute. It had a good message and purpose, but it was actually cute because, again, like, it's a cute little porcupine. But especially like since working in corporate America, I'm dealing with a lot of prickly people in my daily life. Like I'm in different groups that my kids are involved in, and there's a lot of different personalities and character types and traits that I got to get along with. And it's not always easy. I'm not the easiest person. I'm not going to say sometimes I'm not the easiest person to get along with. But I also am very guarded when it comes to getting along with other people. So this book was helpful, and it was cute too because, porcupines. Next, what's this? Okay. Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen: The Emotional Lives of Black Women. This was released in 2022. Black women's strength is intimately tied to their unacknowledged suffering. Dang, that's a tough first sentence. An estimated 8 in 10 have endured some form of trauma: sexual abuse, domestic abuse, poverty, child abandonment, victim/witness to violence, and regular confrontation with racism or sexism. This book shows that trauma often impacts mental and physical well-being. It can contribute to stress, anxiety, PTSD, and depression. Unaddressed, it can lead to hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, overeating, and alcohol and drug abuse, along with other chronic health issues. The book explains that the strong Black woman image does not take into account the urgency of Black women's needs, which must be identified in order to lead abundant lives. It interferes with the relationships and ability to function day to day. Though mindfulness and compassionate self-care, this book offers methods for establishing authentic strength from the inside out. This book I almost didn't put it on this list. I like it. What I like about it, I really like. And what I don't like about it, I really don't like. So I like that it addresses what Black women specifically go through. But that's also one of the things that kind of bugged me about it, because I feel like some of it was far-fetched in my opinion. But it's still like a lot of what I liked about it was, it's true. Like it is like this stigma, how you show up as a Black woman, where you're the strong Black woman, you're a problematic Black woman. You say no, it's an issue. And some of that is unique to Black women specifically. I mean, everybody has their biases and stuff like that. But some of the other stuff, I feel like she was kind of stretching, like she was reaching with some of it. But what I really liked about it the most was that it made me feel like I'm not tripping. Like when I find these subtle, like I'm not targeted really at all, but I'm not always feeling like microaggressions. But when I do, I'm like, am I tripping? I'm always kind of double guessing it. But this book made me think like, yeah, maybe I'm not tripping. She took it too far. So like I said, what I liked, and what I didn't like, I really didn't like. But I put it on this list because it was still helpful for me as a Black woman. Next, we have Trauma and Recovery, the Aftermath of Violence from Domestic Abuse to Political Terror. This was written by Judith Herman, and it was released in 2019. Trauma and Recovery is the foundational text on understanding trauma survivors. By placing individual experience in a political frame, psychiatrist Judith argues that psychological trauma is inseparable from its social and political context. Drawing on her own research on incest, as well as a vast literature on combat veterans and victims of political terror, she shows surprising parallels between private horrors like child abuse and public horrors like war. This edition includes a new epilogue from the author assessing what has and hasn't changed. This book opened my eyes to trauma in general, or trauma at large. Obviously, I know there's different levels to it, but I never thought to actually parallel the trauma, like private traumas versus public traumas. So it was interesting. Half the time I felt like I was reading a textbook. The other half, I felt like I was reading like more of her autobiography, almost, of like close to self-help, but not quite. It was helpful. And I thought it was eye-opening the way that she kind of tied it all back. And again, we're going back to, I think she's a psychiatrist. Yeah, we're going back to tying it all to like the psychology of it all. So I found it interesting. I never really thought about the parallel between public and private trauma, but it was interesting to me. Okay, y'all, we're on 14, almost done. Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist, her therapist, and Our Lives Revealed by Lori Gottlieb. This book was published in 2019. Okay, she's a psychotherapist too. One day, Lori is a therapist who helps patients in her Los Angeles practice. The next, a crisis calls her world to come crashing down. Enter Wendell, a quirky but seasoned therapist in whose office she suddenly lands. With his balding head, cardigan, and khakis, he seems to have come straight from Therapist Central casting, yet he would turn out to be anything but. As Lori reveals the inner chambers of her patients' lives, a self-absorbed Hollywood producer, a young newlywed diagnosed with terminal illness, a senior citizen threatening to end her life on her birthday if nothing gets better, and a 20-something who can't stop hooking up with the wrong guys, she finds that the questions that they struggle with are the very ones she's now bringing to Wendell. With startling wisdom and humor, Lori invites us into her world as both a clinician and a patient, examining the truths and fictions we tell ourselves and others as we teeter on the tightrope between love and desire, meaning and morality, guilt and redemption, terror and courage, hope and change. Okay, this book was funny in a lot of ways and relatable in a lot of ways. I thought, I knew back in the day that if you're a therapist, you should probably have a therapist too. But it's interesting seeing how a therapist actually describes the conversations with her patients, and then how she kind of describes the conversation with her own therapist. And you can kind of see the parallels, or those two like dual stories coming together. So that was cool. It made me think about how when I'm confiding in somebody and they're confiding in somebody else, just like that chain reaction of things. Last book on the list is called Unbroken Brain, A Revolutionary New Way of Understanding Addiction by Maya Svatslisvis. Sorry. And it was published in 2016. More people than ever before see themselves as addicted to or recovering from addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs, prescription medications, sex, gambling, porn, or the internet. But despite the unprecedented attention, our understanding of addiction is trapped in the 20th century ideas, addiction as a crime or as a brain disease, and equally outdated treatment. Challenging both the idea of the addict's broken brain and the notion of a simple addictive personality, Unbroken Brain offers a radical and groundbreaking new perspective, arguing that addiction is a learning disorder, and shows how seeing the condition this way can untangle our current debates over treatment, prevention, and policy. Like autistic traits, addictive behaviors fall on a spectrum, and they can be a normal response to an extreme situation. By illustrating what addiction is and is not, the book illustrates how timing, history, family, peers, culture, and chemicals come together to create both illness and recovery. And there is no addictive personality or single treatment that works for all. She shares her personal story with this and more than 25 years of science and research to thinking about addiction. I've read dozens of books about addiction. I've been surrounded by addiction all of my life. Not personally, depending on how you define addiction, but surrounded by adults in my life that have been addicted to certain things here and there. And I just find it fascinating learning more about it. Even some things that I might have like what I would call an addiction to. I just find it interesting just knowing why and what that looks like, and where that nature versus nurture comes into it. Because for the longest, I actually learned in school that addiction was like something concrete. Like you had an addictive personality to certain things. But when I think about it, like this author framed it on a spectrum, it's like, yeah, like I be trying to stop drinking these sodas. But then you see all the way on the other end where it's people that's willing to sell their children to get whatever they need. So, it's interesting, and it helps me remain empathetic when I lack understanding, or like even thinking just because I don't understand something doesn't mean I need to condemn that person. So this made me think about it in that way, and she has some pretty cool stuff or interesting ways that she framed some of her things. So I know this video was long, but thank y'all for sticking with me. Thank my husband for setting up this camera and these lights so I didn't have to record this on my phone, because this was an important video for me to make. So I appreciate that, and thank y'all for watching.